In March of 2015, I set off to the Kurdistan region of Iraq and Syria. Like the rest of the world, I watched the Syrian civil war escalate from simple protests to a full-blown-out conflict between the Syrian regime, rebel militias, and jihadist groups like the Islamic State and Jabhat al-Nusra. But in this massive game of chess, there was another group that especially caught my eye: Kurdish guerrilla groups known as the PKK and YPG. Watch your eyes. Were these Kurdish fighters made up of fearless warrior women like the American press romanticized? Or were they terrorists, like some of my Turkish friends suggested, operating as opportunists in a bloody war? Whatever the answer was, I knew that portrait photography has a strange way of humanizing even the most distant of situations, and that was my goal. The project would be completely self-funded and independent. I went alone, as there are too many unknowns, and I felt it was too dangerous to bring the people I normally work with, or just asking too much of them. With that said, I'd be in the careful hands of my local fixers, Jan and his wife Ipek, whose responsibility it would be to keep me out of trouble. In the beginning, I thought perhaps it might be a still photography trip only. I had too much stuff as it was. But just as I left the door, I decided to grab my GoPro kit in case anything interesting happened and I could just film it myself. This is that footage.
There are ISIS here.
In the green part.
Yeah, not all of the green part, but they are here, let's say.
Macmore is here.
Yes.
So at this time, ISIS is in the countryside to the west.
Yes. They are in this region and toward Mosul.
My first visit would be with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, based in Macmore. The countryside of Macmore doesn't really strike you as a typical battlefield. Rolling hills and purple flowers are patrolled by men and women in traditional Kurdish outfits, but they're all carrying Kalashnikovs. Macmore was the site of fierce clashes between Islamic State militants and Kurdish forces. At the time of my visit, the Islamic State had lost the city and was 15 to 20 kilometers away, defeated for the time being and spread thin over multiple fronts. The official military of the Kurdistan regional government, the Peshmerga, get a lot of attention in the mainstream press, and rightfully so. However, most residents and refugees will also tell you that guerrilla groups like these play extremely decisive roles in battles against the Islamic State. To many, they're like local heroes. An important distinction must be made between these guerrilla organizations and the Peshmerga. Both KDP and PUK Peshmerga are financed by official governments of Kurdistan, have access to some better weapons and vehicles, and collaborate more with coalition forces. The guerrillas fight with just light weapons and are often overlooked by the outside world as a viable force. But this has less to do with their fighting skills and more to do with a problematic history. Since the PKK's formation in 1978, then later turned militant in 1984 against the Turkish government, they say their stance has evolved since then, from a movement fighting against Kurdish oppression to more of an ideological, internal struggle for democratic values in the entire region. Wow, looks good. Okay, everybody looking here? Even though the PKK is considered a terrorist organization by the United States and is on the same list as ISIS, ironically, here in Macmore, they're supported by coalition airstrikes. My first encounter with the PKK took me by surprise. As much as I've been told in advance of their kindness, I was not quite prepared for the hospitality I was treated with when staying at their base for 4 days. The guerrillas' warm and bubbly nature can almost be deceiving, and their reputation as feared fighters almost seems to vanish after spending just a few hours with them. Yeah, and if she turns her head and looks at me here.
And the camera
Studying the ideology of their leader Abdullah Öcalan, the PKK say goodbye to their families, they say goodbye to their material possessions, and begin a lifelong dedication to the Kurdish resistance. The only entertainment you can find here is a television set buzzing constant updates from the war's front lines, and more importantly, a bookshelf. After all, the PKK do not consider their ideology as just a military movement. Warriors should also be well-read intellectuals. With the conflict against Turkey simmering down, perhaps fighting a new enemy like the Islamic State has given the PKK credibility on the world stage. All right, so right now we are crossing the border into Syria from the Iraqi side of Kurdistan. We're going to be met by some people who are going to pick us up here and make sure that we stay nice and safe in Syria, or Rojava as the Kurds call it.
No.
Gun? No, no, no.
And bomb.
Are you kidding?
And RPG.
Did you inspect this case? This one looks very suspicious, I think.
Oh shit.
Yeah. When we crossed the Iraqi-Syrian border into Rojava, it was very clear that the People's Protection Units, or YPG, are in full control. Similar to the PKK, the YPG is a guerrilla force of men and women fighting alongside one another who follow the teachings of Abdullah Öcalan. There's also the YPJ, an all-female wing that focuses on women's issues.
وخوابك تنجي يعني ما مستعد زماني كردي بو أتك يعني داعش هما تاخد بر يعني برنيو خرادا زيادة يعني حتى إنسان بيا أصلا كهو إدي نما كاري يعني زيدي ولو
أجي وقع على خوي كيزان جهبون دركت يا بك دركت مدي تهزك كردية جاراي كمينا هزك كردي ولو تشد به فلسفة كانوا ديمقراطي بأواك ديمقراطي فرق جدا هنا خنا برات توادنا تانية مثلا أم دركتنا عسكري كردانا هل بيدا شورش جنش بو كردات كان
يعني أجر سب بجنة تاني قتل الجرني كاتي بازا صالية تشتي خراب لان تاني قرطيته هر جن كجاد بقى إرادة وهي أنا جبت شد بأن ما تنجنت هفالي جمع بكجان كمان جاني ماش بروي يعني دنجا هفالي جنة شواجي جري شكل ماش بريتك يعني دترسم يعني جبروي القوات طوانت كيف راستي يعني فيها جت مرة ضاد بهيس كيكي.
Oh, it's you. I kept asking myself, where are their helmets and where are their bulletproof vests? Even though they've captured many of these from the Islamic State, most guerrillas will tell you that they don't want to use them. Their tactics rely on speed and stealth and remaining fluid on a constantly changing battlefield. It is these same guerrilla tactics that led to major successes against their adversaries. Sure, ISIS has tanks, they have heat-seeking missiles and night vision technology, but even with these technological advantages, the jihadist group can still struggle against a force like YPG. Oh, my name is okay. My name is Joseph. Never there? Joseph. Never there? Never there? Shawani? Bash. Bruce Bash.
क्या मिलो
أحلى يك
Yek.
ددو
Do.
سسي
Char.
Char.
Beige.
بيج
Bench.
شار
Char.
سسي ددو
Do.
Yek.
Yek. Yek. Do. Ses. Char. Beige. Beige. Char. In Tel Temer, I met a group of YPG fighters who clashed with ISIS the night before up until that morning.
اما الفي دري صاد جد نفا محل ده نفا او كده الشر شي بيه انا مثلا حمي جي مرمي ديار يعني مرمي تجي خويا حمي تجي مرمي انا مثلا اوا خاني حمي كنت بنا مشاكل تاخذ جامعه على دانا استواتنا ايوه
Look at the house.
مثلا افدر كوهاتن دفردا ملات ابو ملات رابو دريا كليت كر دريا خلقيت خل بيجن الى كي قالوا جماعه دريا كان يخصم من حميه بكوجن ملات جي قبولناك يجبروا هو يجي ما اذا كان سلام ملاته افجي كنت تشتكي كمان خو خصنا بر فيديواري او جي قلوبي ده الفي دريا نسوق اسكر.
The YPG had laid out the bodies of the Islamic State members they had killed. Captured weapons were displayed beside the bodies, clearly wanting to show me that these were ISIS members and the YPG wasn't wreaking havoc upon the local civilians. It's clear that these Islamic State soldiers were extremists. Looking at one young man who had ignited his suicide vest to avoid capture, one thing was certain. He must have had a genuine belief in paradise afterwards, however skewed it might have been. Those are the soldiers, but what about the leadership of ISIS? It has been recently revealed that some of the Islamic State's top military strategists actually come from the Ba'ath Party, formerly working under Saddam Hussein. Despite the ISIS propaganda videos we see showing them as a prophesized, unstoppable conquering force, here they lay like anyone else, lifeless on the battlefields of Syria.
نا في جندي هيا وجندي نكاي هردوك جيت تجي تشتنا هفار بإندي بالطيارة بقى قال ليه دخن أرتق تشتيج دستيمة ورا ما بكن يعني جبنا.
We have some ISIS-occupied villages right here behind me, and they're saying I should go now, but I'll talk as I walk. There's shell casings everywhere on the ground from the battle this morning and last night. And I don't really know what else to say other than I'm being told we have to get out of here. So my friend, I was here and I didn't expect to see someone like you here. Where are you from?
San Antonio, Texas, America.
What brought you out here to Rojava?
The way Daesh is doing people, man. It just what they did to the Yazidi. Our governments won't step in, and you know there's all this politics involved. They're providing airstrike, but just the governments wasn't doing shit about it. By God, we will. If, like Daesh can recruit people from around the world, if all these lunatics can come together to fight, how do normal people come over to fight?
Right. He's got to go? All right. Yo, thanks so much, brother.
All right, bud. Thanks.
Yo.
Good luck, bud.
Somebody injured, so.
With mortar strikes getting closer and closer and the Islamic State advancing, it was too dangerous for me to linger around Tel Temer. As a portrait photographer with not much experience in war, I gladly observed my role. I would spend the next 4 days nearby in Tal Hamis, an area that was liberated from ISIS 10 days before my arrival. Signs of the clashes were everywhere. There were destroyed buildings, exploded cars, and no residents. The place was a ghost town. Marhaba. Here's some lovely guerrilla food we've been having. Marhaba. These guys are up here on the lookout, also keeping warm at the same time. All right, so here we are. We're staying in a YPJ guerrilla base. And the interesting thing about this place is actually 15 days ago, it was an Islamic State base. And you can still see all the insignias, all the graffiti on the wall using the Islamic State flag, the black standard. The symbol, which was a symbol way before Islamic State adopted it as their flag. But just walking around feels a little creepy to know that, you know, not that long ago this was used actually as a stronghold in Rojava for the Islamic State. Now the guerrillas have been successful at repelling them back into the countryside. At this point they're about 10-15 kilometers away. So we're feeling pretty safe here. It's not to say that turf is taken and then won back again every once in a while. But staying with these guerrillas, they're well armed and well trained, so hopefully we'll sleep soundly tonight. There we go. Got my purple blanket. I got the RPG over there by the heater, and should be fine. Good night.
Hello.
أفدر باجاري تلحميسة أف جهي جو أملسار أف جهن جو جنم تدا توب كرين جبو أرزاق إن جنم باشي الملط بلاف دبي داعشي تشتكير دخواست أرزاق إن ملط بقري داست ملط برشي بكي ماجي خواست أم فيجي بقرين دار أرزاق ملط جارة كدي أم لبزي فرينين أف يك خالات دوي جبلند بوناوي دما ناري سر دشتي تحاكمي سر هرجي.
So I'm just exploring this old grain silo that ISIS used to use as a base, and I came across a bunch of pictures on the ground of some soldiers from the Syrian regime, what looks to be some Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces, of course, and also some Iraqi security forces. And all these pictures are kind of cut out with scissors, and I don't know exactly what it's for, but my best guess would be forging some kind of documents for identification cards. But again, I'm not sure exactly what this stuff is, but that would be my best guess. Look at this. It's a helmet with a shitload of bullet holes in it. So it looks like here we have some target practice drawn on the walls. Whoever shot this nailed it, dead center. It's kind of nice here in a way. Like at nighttime it feels creepy, but you know, that's definitely my imagination going wild. But in the daytime there are birds chirping, walking around exploring here. It kind of reminds me a little bit actually how I started photography. I used to, let's say, trespass into a lot of abandoned buildings with my friends, like abandoned power plants, abandoned psychiatric wards, and just kind of do a little bit of urban exploration. It's kind of what this feels like now, walking around here at the old ISIS base. What's left of it. Look at this, ISIS the freezer. So I'm not going to open it because, to be honest with you, that would be a great place to booby trap something. So I won't be opening that today. Let's see what's in here. Oh, a bunch of ammunition cases. I'd love to take some of this stuff back home, but I feel as though when I go through security at the airport and they say, so where are you coming from? And I say, Iraq and Syria. That's probably going to be a big enough problem. And then they're definitely going to check my bags. And then if they find a bunch of ammo cases and things like that, I'm going to have a lot of explaining to do. I know this is just a spoon, but actually, interestingly enough, a lot of the YPG have been telling me that they've been finding spoons in the pockets of a lot of the ISIS members that they've killed or captured. And they say that the reason for that actually is so that when they die, they can dine with their prophet. Here we have a bus that looks like it was the scene of a battle for sure. Got some bullet holes right here. I'm not gonna go inside in case of booby traps. Yazidi Kurds are a religious minority in Iraq, and they became a target of mass atrocities and genocide when the Islamic State entered villages and the city of Sinjar, or Shengal as the Kurds call it. So behind me you can see the entire city of Sinjar, which ISIS has approximately 70% of at this time. The most interesting thing I think is actually on this road up. You can see all the abandoned cars, all the abandoned clothing from when the Yazidi people fled to the mountains because they were being massacred by the Islamic State. And it wasn't too long ago, but you can still see all the evidence just scattered upon the mountainside. It's important to note that the Islamic State didn't enter the area to control its citizens like it did in nearby Mosul. It came to massacre the men and enslave the women. According to the ISIS ideology, the world's non-believers should be eradicated or enslaved, and doing so is not a sin. I spent a few days on a PKK resistance line, observing the battle for the city unfold, sometimes a little too close for comfort. You can hear in the background frequent clashes and fire and mortars, but slowly but surely the guerrillas are pushing forward out of the city, getting ISIS out of the city. Like any group of soldiers on the planet, a good sense of humor is needed as a defense mechanism in this crazy situation that they find themselves in.
داعش 20 متر دي خبرت بينينا بس انا قبل موزيه هري بيش بلا بشرة ترى بيجي تمام ترجمة بلا ترجمة بشرة ترى بيجي.
So we were all sitting down, having a nice lunch and looking at some of my photos on an iPad. All of a sudden we heard a big crash, bang. You see his headband here? These feathers are actually a sign of respect for a warrior. This tribe is Mercy, but he fights another tribe called Bodhi. So this old man once participated in those clashes, so you can consider these feathers as a visual symbol of that. Came outside and it looks like they're shelling this hill behind me. Here's the aftermath. And you can stand like this so you can see through the... It's okay. It's okay. Jen, can you go grab me my... Jen. Alright, so the mortars are getting closer now. These guys are getting ready. They all interrupted lunch, grabbed their Kalashnikovs and running out the door. Commander uses a radio to stay in touch with his fighters on the front lines, but also closely monitors another channel, the one ISIS uses. The next day, the guerrillas had a military-style funeral for one of their fighters that died in the clash. I thought it was important to include a few portraits of Yazidi Kurds displaced by the Islamic State, so I photographed a few portraits in a guerrilla-protected camp. So we've left Shengal, Sinjar, and we've come back to the Syrian side in Rojava, and we're actually in a refugee camp. And it's places like this where all the citizens who are fortunate enough to get away from the Islamic State now live. You can see in this specific camp, Newroz camp, or New Year's camp, the conditions aren't so bad. Each family has a tent like this to themselves. There's heat, there's electricity from 5 p.m. until midnight. It's not so bad, but of course, with all that said, it's still not home. It's still not the beautiful place that was stolen away from them. So people are living here in a sort of weird state of limbo until their city can become liberated and they can move back again.
آوی جایش من رکری جبلی خدا و پکا که دید خلاص کری جای شنگال دایکا من هجیر تاب خوین دگرین قل خدان شرف و غیرت دی ساویل تزیورین راب نصر خوا راب نصر خوا راب نصر خوا راب نصر خوا سپاس.
Not all have it as good as in Newroz camp. In Zakho, I witnessed Yazidi refugees living in makeshift dwellings inside a concrete structure for a future shopping center. But not all Yazidi Kurds await liberation in refugee camps. Many are active as community leaders or being trained to take up arms themselves against the Islamic State or future threats. In the mountains of Shengal, I met and photographed portraits of brave young women on a base who had joined the newly formed Shengal Resistance Unit. After training, they'll join the guerrillas in the fight. Their commander told me that the biggest challenge they faced had nothing to do with the training, but was psychological. Even after the war is long over, one can imagine the internal damage done to an entire generation on every side of the conflict. At the end of a video, you're supposed to share what you learned and wrap everything up with a nice bow. The fact is, this conflict has so many moving pieces, so many different motivations, and so many groups that it's hard to even find a place to begin, but especially where to end. As an observer alongside the guerrillas, obviously I have incredible bias, and that's clear in this video. Over my trip, I found that I was protected not only by my fixers, Jan and Ipek, but the Kurdish people as a whole. It is the hospitality of the Kurds that made a photography series like this possible. On my way back, I came across the funeral of a British YPG fighter, Konstantinos Eric Skirfield, or Costa in short. Costa was a volunteer who sympathized with the Kurdish struggle and fought alongside them, the first British national to die in this conflict. Costa's body was being received by family members at the border on its way back to the United Kingdom. Here, the women cried the same way for Costa as they did for one of their own. The fact is, almost the entire world has been drawn into this conflict one way or another. If a British YPG member were to meet a foreign fighter of the Islamic State on the battlefield, what happens? At this point, the conflict becomes ideological, although physically fighting on land. Once the Islamic State is ultimately defeated, a territorial battle may have been won, but an ideological war may still remain. In our lifetimes, we may see a war not only fought on soil with crumbling buildings and wavering borders, but also a war of internal ideologies, naked to the human eye, but pulsing and vivid within the human heart.
من دوري